Good morning, good afternoon, or maybe even good evening for wherever you are joining us from on planet Earth. We are delighted that you're here with us today because we've got something very special. Well, every time April shows up, it's really special. This is our fourth recording with April. She has so graciously consented to tell us her story, her words in real time. Uh, for those of you who may not have caught the first three episodes, and she told us about all that stuff that led up to the decision to go see the doctor, uh, how she felt, taking her first medications, the changes that happened in that immediate period, the first 3 months. And then she came back and gave us a 6 month look back. Well, this is our 1 year anniversary birthday for April and the big look back for a year. Now, y'all might have noticed that April and I are pretty good friends, and we've had a great relationship for about a year and a half or so. Uh, on the occasion of her anniversary, birthday, whatever, I sang happy birthday to her, but I don't know that she was quite so enamored of that. There's just no such thing as a joyful noise that comes from here. You can always tell where I'm sitting in church because there's nobody sitting around me.
Singing is a relative term.
My wife is over there saying, "Oh yeah, whenever you do show up at church, that is." All right, enough of that. All right, April, we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to divide this up. So the first section we're going to call the lightning round. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, 60 seconds or less. Give us those thoughts. I don't think the audience is going to hold you to that.
Okay.
Give us your kind of bullet points, the important things that just strike your heart and your mind for that question. And then I'm going to give you a chance to just run with your story. But I will ask you to then weave those things together that you shared with us during the lightning round. How does that sound?
That sounds great, but just so everyone knows, I have not seen these questions, so I am very afraid.
Our prior episodes, we worked on the questions in terms of how we were going to tell the story and march it out. And I threw her a curveball this morning. So she had no preparation.
Which is not all that unusual because I'm typically known as clueless.
Okay. All right. I think our audience wants us to be serious. All right. We'll get started. All right. Ding, 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 ding. Lightning round. 60 seconds or less. Tell us what you think, what you feel for these questions, Miss April. Okay. All right. First off, give us a summary of this last year. Give us the big pieces.
Wow. That's probably like the entire 60 minutes or so that we have, right? That's the whole thing. It has just been an amazing year. I can't believe that it's been a year. There have been so many changes, so many wonderful things that have happened. So many things that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the specifics, but it's just been an amazing year for me. Things that I didn't expect to happen, things that I did kind of expect or hope to happen, did. Changes that people have told me that they see that I don't see, that I guess probably from looking in the mirror every day at myself, I don't notice the changes as much. So, I would just say, it was just totally amazing from start to finish.
Well, since you kind of told that part on a positive note, then what was or were your biggest success or successes that you had during this year?
Sure. Number one definitely began with eliminating the dysphoria. And that was really why I came into this to begin with. I had learned to control it, but it was always present. Within about 2 weeks of starting hormone therapy, it was gone. Over that time, I have more and more been able to look in the mirror and see this person looking back at me, who I have longed to find for many, many years. And so, I think that would be the two largest things: eliminating the dysphoria and self-recognition, acceptance of who I am, and being able to look in that mirror and see myself.
Okay. Well, this one's a little bit harder. What was your biggest failure or failures?
Failures. Wow. I think that I could tie that back to expectations that I think many of us have a tendency to think, I'm going to start this and like tomorrow I'm going to start seeing changes. And so I think I got, I was just anticipating too much. Maybe expecting changes too much, and that leads to disappointment. You're kind of looking and you get frustrated because you're not seeing those changes. And again, I think some of that is just the fact that I'm looking in the mirror every day, and looking for changes, like, looking down and waiting for something to happen.
I'm not going to look down because nothing ever happened.
I can't say that, but yes. So yeah, I think that was probably it, D. That's probably the largest thing. My expectations were just too high in that I expected things to happen more quickly or feel them more drastically than I did. There's a lot of subtleness to this that I think just takes time to come out.
Okay. Well, again, along that line, what do you think your biggest mistake was? What did you do that you really messed up? I know there's lots.
Yeah, I know, because I do that on a regular basis, right? You know that. You've spent enough time with me to know that screw up is my middle name. I think that I relied too much on the place that I originally started with to help me kind of work my way through starting the process and then getting to the proper levels of hormones that I should be. I think I had a little too much faith in the physician that I started with, and I learned the hard way that was the wrong thing to do, and that caused a major sea change kind of in the middle, just like after the 6-month mark. That has kind of set me back to a degree, in that I'm still working to try and find the optimal hormone level.
Okay. All right. So, big question for everybody, and something that we probably all face with this process of your social transition, or we'll call it the social part of your gender journey. Have you had any concerns about being outed, being found out, discovered?
Oh, sorry. You're not
No,
done.
actually, I did that to you on purpose.
You were at a comma, not a period.
No. Because that, I think, is perhaps based on what you and I have talked about over the past year and a half or so, it's a big concern. So I know it's important in your story. So let this serve as our segue for you to now just have free reign, and I'll zip it.
Well, I hope that
leave it all together.
Yeah, but you need to keep me on track here too. And I know that ultimately questions will come out of this. That's right. Reel me back from time to time. you just kind of go to the beginning of the, the concerns. It's really kind of interesting. I have more concerns at the impact on Lynn than I do on me. There are times where I almost wish that I'd be outed, just because then I'd be totally out there. I still kind of play around locally because I'm so well known in the community. And so I'm out with some people locally, I'm out with family, some friends, but not totally in the local area. You get to that point where you're just tired of hiding. You're tired of you know who you are. You're going to face some blowback as a result, because there are people out there who do not believe. But at the same time, you just get to that point to say, this is who I am, and I want to live my life as I am. I still do have to kind of bounce back and forth. I'm probably 90%. But there are times I go into settings where I know I have to kind of go more androgynously, although I have to tell you, it's getting harder and harder to hide the growth. But sorry, at least I didn't grab on, right?
Well, don't make me jealous, all right? Just keep telling the story.
It's not that much, but it's all mine. Yeah, so there are still some times that I have to do that. And it's really more, for example, I'm going to go on a trip here pretty soon to visit my sister. And ultimately, I'll be with some friends of hers out there on a golfing outing. And there are some people in that group who are, kind of dyed in the wool, non-believers, right? And so I don't want to infect my wife or my sister in this case. I don't want to potentially ruin friendships for her. And so I go into that androgynous mode, with as tight of a sports bra as I can stand, to kind of hold on. But I know there have been changes that people have pointed out. My face has changed a bit. The fat distribution in my cheeks and that, and I didn't see it at first, but all of a sudden it was like, wow, wait, what happened there? I like that. So, I think there is still some of that, but it is more focused on the impact of others than it is on me, because I don't want my wife to have to struggle with people. I don't want my sister or brother-in-law or other people. So, if I was outed, I wouldn't have to worry about that so much anymore, but I would. So
tell us a story, kind of from the beginning, kind of that run up to seeing the doctor, and then weave the whole story together for us.
Sure. And I think, the very beginning, it was just a matter of, again, understanding that I needed to do something about the dysphoria. And so I had that discussion with Lynn ultimately, and we agreed that starting hormones was probably the thing that was going to help most. And it did. My first few weeks were really, just life-changing, and it continued. If you go back and you look at the other videos, I talk about the physical changes that I started to see, the differences in my skin, the differences in my hair, the difference in my thought process, that I began to have slowly over time, the emotional response that I would have. I cry at commercials now that I never used to before, right? Lynn and I hand each other tissues. So there are those kind of changes. And then, at about the 2-month mark, I started to feel some changes, in my chest and my nipples especially, and then started to see some growth. My hair has changed. My hair is thicker. It's less oily. It's just, those changes are just kind of magnificent because you hear about them, but all of a sudden you feel it. My difficulty with having my hormones balanced out was, the doctor that I was working with was through a women's center, and they, he's done this for a while, but I don't think it's certainly not his full-time job. He was an OBGYN. And so what happened, I was just like bouncing up and down. They had me on pills. Pills have a higher risk rate of stroke, heart issues, especially as you get older. And, at 71, that was a concern for me. And so we got to a point where, I had the dosage that I was on was keeping me just kind of below the feminine levels of estrogen. And I was in menopause. I woke up with night sweats. I had hot flashes. And so at that point, the doctor wanted to push me, up another 2 milligrams a day in pills. And I just didn't want to do that. The washout through my liver and, the potential increase that I might see with another increase in dosage. I just worried too much about the potential impact. So I convinced them to switch me over to injectable estradiol valerate. And then, so they put me on a dose, and about 3 months later, when I checked, I had skyrocketed. I mean, I was in the danger category. And from my perspective, the doctor probably should have known that was way too much of a dose for me to have.
I'm going to interrupt you just a bit.
Yeah.
For the listeners, I am not April's physician, but
No.
Having done this for 40 years, I beat her senseless. Let's just say my advice was very strong.
Right.
In the physician that she saw initially, this just wasn't what he enjoyed, loved, or really understood very well. And her levels were low, and it was painful for me to see what she described as having those menopausal symptoms and night sweats. And then she went to an injectable dose, and I was like, okay, honey, that's enough of this BS. You need a new doctor.
Right.
Don't walk out the door. Run, please. Yes. So I got a little forceful with my dear friend.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank goodness, because I really needed that. And so, I switched over to another provider, and so far it's been good. Still, I'm kind of incrementalizing my way down. I'm very close to being where I should be at this point. And so I think after this I just made a dosage change on Friday, and so that I think will get me, if not there, almost there, for when I have another blood test done in 2 months. So I think, if I look back over this year, it has just been, amazing from start to finish. We all kind of focus on, I think, the physical changes, the things that we want to see that would make us feel more feminine. But I think it's probably the mental aspect that I just didn't really understand until I, kind of got into it, and I was able to sit back and reflect a little bit. I feel more comfortable. I'm just, this is me. This is who I am. I look in the mirror, as I said, and I see that trans woman looking back at me. One of the points that I know that I wanted to make, Dan, I guess maybe this might be a good time to do that, is that from my perspective, and I think you believe the same, that we share much more in common with our crossdresser sisters than people generally might think, that our similarities are much greater than our differences. We've just moved a little farther down the spectrum. But there are changes. And I have to say that, sometimes people have to smack me too, to remind me that there are some subtle differences for there. And so, it used to be that I really worried about getting dressed up. How did I look? Was this a nice dress? Now it's kind of like, throw on the jeans, throw on a sweatshirt, maybe I'll have a little makeup on, but, I don't mind hopping on the lawnmower, and just being me, because because that's who I am, right? There is no longer, I'm trying to be this person. This is who I am. And so, that if there was probably one great epiphany for me, it was that. And that took a while. It took a while for me to kind of get to that point where I just kind of forgot. There are times when I don't even think about, gee, I'm a transgender woman. I'm just me. I'm April, and that's just my life. The physical changes are great. They're wonderful. It feels so great, to have to wear a bra, and to know that this is all me. I'm not as large as many, but I am just me, and I'm comfortable with how I look across the board. I've seen changes in muscular structure, right? My legs are definitely, my thighs have changed. I'm starting to get hips, starting to get a bit of a butt. So, those kind of physical changes are amazing. But the downsides are too that I don't have the stamina that I used to have. I don't have the muscle strength that I used to have. And I've got to take that into consideration when I'm working around our place here, trying to do things that I used to do, like, moving half a ton of gravel the other day. It was a little tiring. It knocked me down for a while. So, there are things that you give up, but at the same time, they're just amazing things. Just to circle back on the similarities, though, I think between us and our sisters on the crossdresser side is that we all go through that same emotional ride as we go through our lives. The whole issues of guilt, of self-doubt, right? Of fear, of shame. All of those things are the same. They kind of bind us as a community, and then we can help uplift each other as we go through our lives by addressing those things and realizing that there is no reason to have those things, that we are who we are, that gender is a huge spectrum. It's not an either or, it is a huge spectrum. And where we fall on that, where we need to go to on that spectrum is where we are most happy, where we are happy as individuals, and finding that spot. And that then gives us the ability to support each other, to be a community.
Okay. One of the things that I haven't heard from you so far, you talk about the relationship with your physician provider. What about, how have you relied on your mental health provider during this past year?
Yeah. I one of the things that I did when I sat and talked with Lynn too, I've been in therapy for 3.5 years. I was very fortunate to find on my first try a wonderful, wonderful therapist. Becky is just amazing. She's pulled me out of some really tight spots over the years. But one of the things that I did when Lynn and I sat down was I committed to stay with Becky, at least for a while as I began hormone therapy, because as you know, Dee, there can be some mental implications of hormone therapy. It can lead to depression. And the fact that I had been depressed for years prior to starting hormone therapy, there was certainly some danger there. Fortunately, I haven't seen it. It's been just amazing. But I've continued to stay with Becky, and Becky has helped me to address, those kind of residual fears that exist out there. I think one of the other things that we tend to unfortunately, we share, for those of us that have spouses or significant others or family members in our lives, we fear loss. We tend to worry about how this change or how we are in life might affect how others feel about us, and that could lead to loss. So, Becky has helped me to address those kind of fears to work my way through them. How do I go about addressing them, with Lynn or with other people? So definitely there is, to me, a huge implication or need for a continued mental health aspect of what we're doing.
Well, you touched on it tangentially a couple of times, describing your discussions with your mental health provider. So this one's going to be a little bit more difficult for you, and I'm sorry for bringing up a difficult thing, but you and I have talked a lot about it.
Sure.
There was an issue or problem that came up with your spouse, and it was pretty rough and pretty dark there for a while. Okay, what happened? And kind of weave that together with how things have moved along with your spouse.
Sure. And I try and couch this in, I can't speak for her. And I also, there's some anonymity there that I try and hold on to. But yeah, transition is not an easy thing for anybody, right? In some respects, it is much easier for those of us that are going through it, because we're doing something that is having a tremendous impact on us, right? And making us feel, maybe for the first time in our lives, right about ourselves. For a spouse, a significant other, family member, it can be a huge change, right? A tremendous impact, a shock, and in some respects, it is, I think, very similar to your spouse or significant other going through facing the death of a partner. Because even though I'm here, I'm that same kind of person. I don't look the same anymore, right? There are aspects of me, but I don't respond the same. There are mental changes. There are behavioral changes associated with this. And so we hit a spot where Lynn was still struggling, and it led to a couple really, really difficult days for us. What that ultimately ended up with was Lynn working with a therapist for a period of time, me very heavily talking with Becky and working with mine. And what we realized, I mean, really within about a day and a half, was that we just deeply love each other. That we've been together for 51 years at that point. I can't imagine, and Lynn is at that spot. We can't imagine a life apart, and so we are much better people together. We're a team. We've been through hell together in many different things over the years, and so this was just another challenge. Lynn had to work her way through it. I couldn't tell her how to feel. And I think that's an important thing to remember for members of our community, whether it's our crossdresser sisters, or transgender sisters. You can't tell your significant other, your spouse, how to feel. You just can't, as much as you'd like to. They're going to feel the way they feel. What you can do is help them to understand why it is that this is important to you in your life, and to understand that you are still in love with them, you are still with them, you still want to be with them, you value them. And that's, for Lynn and I, even over the years, whenever, this, Steve, not every day is a good day when you're married, right? You have differences of opinion. You are different people. You grow and mature, you change over time. And sometimes you just hit a spot where, everything is not perfect, but you work your way through that because you love each other, and you're dedicated to each other. that's how we've gone through life. And I honestly, I have to give Lynn the most credit. She will not accept failure or defeat. She's, I committed, I am sticking with you, no matter. And so, and from that respect, I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed with what's going on. Again, when people ask how long we've been married, we'll typically say like 34 happy years out of 51 total, right? So, I mean, if I were in Major League Baseball and that was my batting average, I'd be making millions. But that's just, kind of a way of saying that not every day is a great day, that you do. Everyone has their struggles. But it's that commitment, that love for each other that really kind of bridges you through. And if you keep touching back to that, that's how you continue to stay. But you can't tell your spouse how to feel.
It's something that something you also said that was important. You've had a long-term relationship with your mental health provider because you have had a lot going on and currently have a lot going on.
Yeah.
Well, your partner's in this with you, and there's some big things that go on for them. And Lynn had the opportunity has the opportunity to work with a mental health provider,
right,
to help her process through all this.
Right.
And you and I have both made that exact point with our brothers and sisters at CDH and TGH, that, this is a shared experience, and each of us shares a responsibility to the other, but we also have a responsibility to work with that outside agent, our mental health provider, to make sure that, we are processing as individuals and as a couple.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a shock whether you tell your spouse that you enjoy cross-dressing, or you tell them you're transgender. It's a shock because it's not something that they've necessarily expected. Some spouses just, it just washes right over, but others it doesn't, and in some cases it never does. And that's why some of us, end up in the closet for, as long as we're willing to do that. But yeah, there's a responsibility to each other, and there's a responsibility to yourself. You have to be who you are. Otherwise, you end up, as I did, deeply depressed. And that's not good for your relationship either.
Since you mentioned the word depressed, take a long look back, especially at that time, the year, 2 years, 3 years leading up to your decision that April needed to live a life of her own. You suffered some significant depressive issues. Can you tell us just a little bit about that part?
Sure. I didn't see it. I knew I was fighting with something, and I was in a lot of denial, as we often are, right? Especially those in our generation. That you were brought up never thinking that this was possible, right? So there was a lot of denial going on, and so that just kind of set up a constant process, in your brain of fighting yourself, and the guilt, the shame, all of those things that just kind of kept driving me deeper and deeper into depression. And it manifested itself as an anger. I was very short-tempered. It's not physical, it's never, and that was never abusive physically, but I responded, anger would just bubble up very quickly. I became very quiet, and and I tucked myself away in the den and really just didn't want to interact with people because I was having this mental fight with myself, and I was embarrassed of, who could this person be, and so I became more distant. And Lynn and I had always been very close. We loved doing things together, and all of a sudden now, over a period of time, I got more and more away from that. And Lynn saw that, but she didn't understand why. She couldn't understand the why, and that sometimes our spouses begin to blame themselves, right? Or significant others blame themselves. Maybe I'm responsible for this. What am I not doing in the relationship? And it was all me. It was clearly me. Finally got to that point where I was so distracted, so, kind of in my own brain, in my own thoughts, that it was like I wasn't present most of the time. I wasn't listening. Lynn would say things I didn't hear, because I was just somewhere else in my mind, and became deeply depressed to the point where I was suicidal. And luckily Lynn cornered me on New Year's Day 3.5 years ago and said, "What's wrong? Something's wrong." And it just blurted out. All of my feelings came out at that point. That's not the way to tell your spouse. So please don't follow my lead at all. Don't let it get there. But yeah, I was in a deep depression, and thankfully, Lynn encouraged me to start therapy right away. And I found Becky, because God, what a godsend she has been for me.
Now, you touched several things, and again, I'm sorry, to bring that out, but you and I have talked about it as friends a lot. We've talked about it with our brothers and sisters at CDH and TGH.
Mm-hmm.
You said it several times today. We are so much alike, regardless of where we find ourselves on that gender spectrum, the LGBTQIA. We're a family.
Right.
Yes, we're a community, but we're a family. We share so many things. And for our brothers and sisters who are maybe just beginning their gender journey and exploration, our brothers and sisters that are the cross-dressers, we've been there. We all feel those same things. You'll see it in yourself, you'll see it in others, but it's important for us to be able to tell that story in a public venue. It helps us, and it helps our brothers and sisters. And that's really why April committed to doing this and sharing her life with us for the past year. All right. Well, April, let's wrap this up a little bit. We've looked backwards a lot. Let's look forward.
Right.
Where do you think life is going for you over the next year, 2 years, etc.?
Right. I know that I still have a lot of change to go through from the impact of the hormones. That it takes years. This is not a quick change that happens. Day one, you take a pill, and then boom, you wake up the next morning and you look like a woman. So there are a lot of changes that I'm still going to go through, and I look forward to those because they're altering for me in terms of how I kind of visualize myself. I'm more and more having these opportunities to get out into the world, and I so enjoy those. And we talk when we do our live. We did our live from Keystone, and we're going to do one from ACC. I'm going to go to Erie this year. Those opportunities for us to get out into the community they just have such a tremendous impact. And for me, it's like I'm getting to live again. I'm getting out into the world. We've made a couple trips already. We went to Key West and we went to Boston, and we've got trips that we've got scheduled coming up over the next year. Not just ACC coming up in September or Erie in November, but we're looking at taking a big train or trip across Canada in May, and going to a few other places that I get to go as me. I get to finally experience as me. And as you know, the world is different when your hormone balance is adjusted from estrogen or from testosterone driven to estrogen driven, and you see the world differently. And so I'm looking forward to experience the world like that more and more over the next year or two.
Right. One last question, and we posed this in the very first episode. If you knew then what you know now,
right? ... Yeah. I think one of the things that we all do is we tend to look backwards, and sometimes we do that with regrets, and we say, oh, if only I had come out earlier, or if only I had begin transition earlier in my life. I mean, there are things I know that I will never experience, just the ability to kind of wear a more low cut dress, I'm at that age where I can't get away with that stuff anymore. I can't wear my underwear on the outside like young women might want to do or can do now. Right. So there are just things that I know I'm not going to be able to do, but there is so much that I get to experience, so many things. And I have had just an amazing, wonderful life. I have a wonderful family. They've been so great at accepting this change. But, I have 2 wonderful careers, so many friends. I can't look back and say I'd change, because I wouldn't want to miss any of that. I'm just grateful, very, very thankful that I was able to do this, begin this transformation at a time where I could, enjoy it. I wasn't too old. I don't think you're ever too old to find yourself. There are some things that you're not going to be able to do, or, some clothes that you probably shouldn't wear. But at the same time, there is so many opportunities to really live your life and to find yourself. And as we finding where we fall on that spectrum, where we are happy, and being in that place is life-changing. Doesn't matter where you are. It's when you can finally find that spot and accept it. There's a great workbook out there that I think for our members of our community, if you're kind of wondering about it, I don't know whether you've heard about this, Dee. There's a book called by an author, Dara Hoffman Fox, and it's You and Your Gender Identity, A Guide to Discovery, I think is the name of it. Yeah. Do you remember that book? And it's available for like $15 on Amazon. And it's a really neat kind of workbook to take you through the questions that will help you to find where you are. So, if you're not sure about therapy, you're not ready to do that, I would recommend that to our sisters as a way to kind of, just kind of get a feeling for yourself on where you are. Nobody can tell you even a therapist cannot tell you that you are transgender. You're the only one that can tell yourself that.
Got to start at home.
That's it. Yes. Right.
April, it's been an incredible year. You just said, we look back and, we ponder those things that could have been, that coulda, woulda, shoulda. You and I have had a great time for the past year and a half. I have valued and treasured all the things that we've had a chance to talk about, all the silliness and laughter that we've shared. And I'll even forgive you for all those times you made me blush. I'll look past that. But you've done something really extraordinary. Sharing yourself with our brothers and sisters here, and I really applaud you for that. Thank you so much. We can't speak for our spouses, and we can't speak for our brothers and sisters in the community, but I think I'll put a voice to. I think they'll thank you also. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, when you have a chance to view this, and again, I'll speak for my sister April. If you have any questions or thoughts, please share them with her. As you know, she's a hound at CDH and TGH. You'll find her there most times of day and night. But we really, really appreciate all of you spending your time with us, regardless whether it's morning, noon, or night. Thank you very much. And for CDH and TGH, I'll sign us off. But April, what last words would you like to say before we hit the end of recording?
I am just so very grateful, first of all, Dee, for your friendship and everything that you've done for me and with me, and for all the times I've been able to make you blush. I'm very thankful for each and every one of those. Liz taught me how to do that. But I am most grateful for this community, CDH, TGH, the sisters that I have met, the people who have reached out to me, who have enriched my life, who have helped me to better understand myself, and by letting them be parts of their lives. It has just been an amazing, a little more than a year for me since I joined CDH and TGH. And I feel very, very, very blessed to have the friendship of so many wonderful people on both of those venues.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, good morning, good afternoon, good night, and thank you for being with us today. Bye-bye.